download our Revise It Right revision app for hundreds of videos, quizzes, exam questions, tutor support and so much more. This video is about relative formula mass. So we need to be able to calculate and work out relative formula mass. So I'm going to go through some examples now. Okay, so here we've got carbon dioxide. So really the first step to work out our relative formula mass is we need to know which elements make up our compound and how many of them. So here we've got carbon, so we've got one carbon, and here we've got two oxygen. So we've got two oxygen. Okay. Then what we need to do is we need to find these two elements on the periodic table. So carbon looks like this on the periodic table, and oxygen looks like this on the periodic table. Okay, now you'll remember that the mass number is the largest number, the larger number on the periodic table. So we need to use that when working out our relative formula mass. Okay, because we need to find the mass of each element. So there's one carbon, and we know by looking at the periodic table that carbon has a mass of 12. So one carbon has a mass of 12. Okay, now there's two oxygen. Now we know that one oxygen on the periodic table has a mass of 16. Okay, however there are two of those because it's O2. So we need to times 16 times by 2, which gives us 32. Okay, so step 1, we highlighted the elements and how many. Step 2, we found those elements on the periodic table. And then step 3, we found the mass from the number on the periodic table and wrote those down. And the final step, step 4, is we need to add these two numbers together. Okay, so we've got 32, which is the mass of O2, plus 12, which is the mass of carbon, okay, which gives us 44. And that is the answer for the relative formula mass of carbon dioxide, 44. Remember to download our Revise It Right revision app, watch over 700 videos, answer 4,000 plus quiz questions, over 1,000 flashcards, 1,000 exam questions, worksheets, forums, and get help from qualified teachers and so much more. The link is in the description. Okay, so let's go through another one. So here we got silicon carbide. Okay, so first step, just like we did, we need to find the elements that are within this. So we know we've got silicon and we know we've got carbon. Okay, so they are the two elements that you find in silicon carbide. Okay, now what we then need to do is we need to find these on the periodic table. So silicon is 28, silicon 14. So that's what silicon looks like on the periodic table. And then carbon is 12, C and 6. Okay, so step 2, we need to find them on the periodic table. So there we are. Okay, now you don't have to draw these in an exam. I'm just drawing these for you so you can see what I can see on the periodic table. You don't have to draw them out. We then need to find the mass for each of those. So silicon has a mass of 28 and carbon has a mass of 12. Okay, so there's only one of each, so we only need to do one of each for this one. Then we can add those together, okay, to make 28 plus 12 equals 40. So the relative formula mass of silicon carbide is 40. We'll do one more, this one slightly harder and probably really as hard as it gets. So first things first, we need to write out the elements that you have. So Al, aluminium, and we have two of these. Okay, so Al, and we can see there's two of these. Okay, now this is where it may get a bit more confusing or it may not, but everything that's in this bracket here is being times by this number here. So there are 3 lots of everything in this bracket. Okay, 3 lots of everything. Now that can confuse some of you, but let's go through what I mean by that. Okay, so here we have our sulfur. Now there's only one sulfur here, but there's also 3 lots of those. So actually we need 3 sulfur because there's 1 sulfur in the bracket, but there are 3 lots of everything in the bracket, as you can see by this little number here. And then oxygen, Now there's 4 lots of oxygen in the bracket. However, there are 3 lots of everything in that bracket. So we need to do 4 times 3. So that's 12. So there are 12 lots of oxygen. Okay, so 2 lots of aluminium because there's 2 there. 3 lots of sulfur because there's 1 in the bracket, but 3 lots of everything in the bracket. And 12 lots of oxygen because there are 4 lots in the bracket and 3 lots of everything in the bracket. Okay, so let's find these on the periodic table. So aluminium is 27, Al 13. Okay. Sulfur 32, sulfur 16. Again, you don't have to draw these out in your exam. I'm just drawing them so you can see what I can see on the periodic table. And oxygen. Okay, now remember, we need to find the largest number. Okay, the larger of the numbers is the mass number. So aluminium has a mass of 27. However, there are 2 of these, as we can see here. So 27 times 2, which gives us 54. Okay, sulfur has a mass of 32. Okay, but there are 3 of these, as you can see here. So it's 32 times 3, which gives us 96. And finally, oxygen has a mass of 16. Okay, it has a mass of 16, but there are 12 of these. Okay, so we need to do 16 for 1 times by 12 because there are 12 of them, and that gives us 192. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to add these numbers together to find our total relative formula mass. So we've got 54, add 96, add 192, and that comes out at 342. Okay, so the relative mass of this compound is 342. Okay, now what I'd like you to have a go at is answering these questions here. Okay, so we'll go through the answers after, so pause the video now. Okay, so let's go through these answers. So sodium, if you found sodium on the periodic table, it should have been 23. Okay, so 23 for sodium. However, there are 2 of these, so you really should have got 46 for that. Plus oxygen, which is 16. So what you should have got as your answer is 62 for that one. Okay, so that should have been 62. Aluminium is obviously 27 on the periodic table, but there are 2 of those, so it should have got 54. And oxygen is 16, but there are 3 of those, so you should have done 16 times 3, which would have got you 48. Okay, then you obviously add 54 plus 48, and your answer should have been 102. Aluminium hydroxide here. So aluminium, as we just said, is 27, and there's only 1 of those. Now O, there's 1 in the bracket of oxygen, but there's 3 outside, so we need to times everything in the bracket by 3. Okay, so it's O3, so there's 3 lots of the oxygen in the end. So you should have done 16 times 3, which would have got you 48. And the same with hydrogen, there's 1 in the bracket, but 3 outside the bracket. Okay, so really that means there's 3 hydrogen, and 3 times 1 is 3. Okay, so then you do 27, add 48, add 3, and your answer should have been 78 for that one. And finally, magnesium. Here we go. So magnesium on the periodic table is 24. Nitrogen, there's 1 lot of nitrogen in the bracket, but everything in the bracket is times by 2. Okay, because there's 2 outside the bracket. So 14 is 1 nitrogen, times by 2 is 28. And oxygen, O3, there's 3 lots of oxygen in the bracket, but everything in that bracket is times by 2. So really, that means there's 6 lots of oxygen. So 16 times 6 gives you 96. Okay, then we need to add these numbers together. So 24, add 28, add 96, and you should have got 148 for your answer. So I hope you got all those right, and if you did, really, you can now move on to the quiz and exam questions to really test your knowledge. If there's anything you don't understand, then please get into contact with one of our tutors and they will be happy to help.